Welcome again, everyone. I'm Richard Fredrickson. This Profiles here on Channel 6, and what a delight. We have been trying to find this gentleman some time in his schedule, and we finally have done this. May I introduce you to Mr. John Jack Rogers, one of the founding partners of Wermer Rogers, Duran and Ruzon, and we are going to take you down the road, a little bit of the history of this iconic company here in Joliet. And as we do that, and as we talk with Jack Rogers, we're going to take you along a little bit the history of Joliet as well. So it's going to be fun, it'll be interesting, and hopefully educational. First of all, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks, Jack, thank you. Maybe just briefly, tell us a little bit about Jack Rogers before we talk about Wermer Rogers, Duran and Ruzon.
Well, actually, I was born and raised in Chicago. I went to school there, went to DePaul University in Chicago. My partner, Jim Wermer, and I happened to be classmates in grammar school. We were classmates in college. We were in service together. And then for a number of years afterwards, we worked together at a Chicago CPA firm, Banzi and Keenan, which had an office in the 1950s, 40s and 50s in Joliet. So Jim came down here to start a practice in probably 53. And in 1957, he invited me down, and I joined him. We began on January 15th, 1957. In a small office in the Lee Theater building, which was at 813 West Jefferson.
Now, what is, locate that for us right now. What is that?
About 100 feet west of Rayner and Jefferson. Okay. And it was a theater that ran shows once in a great while. We were upstairs in the area right across from projection booths. We had an office with a gentleman named Jim Red McCarthy, who was a insurance man, sold for Massachusetts Mutual, I believe. And we shared one office at that time, then later we had separate offices up there. Interesting aspect of that involvement with Jim, Red McCarthy, we had clients in the late 50s named Playmac and Palmac, Player and Palmer Mac. And if you've ever read a history of the story of those people, both Player, Gary Player, and Arnie Palmer became successful because they fell into the area of a gentleman named Mark McCormick, a Cleveland, Ohio lawyer, who started demanding better prices for the time they spent at Pro-Am tournaments and so forth, and public appearances, and also for such things as certifying golf clubs. And it's an interesting story of history in the United States at that time. At the time it started, they were getting very small amounts, like $100 for a day at a Pro-Am tournament. And it was now it's in thousands of dollars.
Now it's millions.
Yeah. But that was one of the times we started. So we shared an office, Jim Wermer and I and Red. And then later we split, and he had his own office, and we had our own office. And we stayed there until, and I'm a little uncertain, sometime around 60, we moved out to Marycrest Shopping Center, which at that time had been laying vacant. It was being converted to offices. It had been built by Rami Hamas, and it was just a nice place on the west side. It had a big parking lot.
Let me stop you for a second there. Now, is that street named after him?
Yes, he was.
So really it's Hamas.
Actually, Rami Hamas developed all of the houses from Jefferson Street to south to McDonough in that particular area, called Marycrest. And at that time was one of the newer subdivisions in Joliet.
Okay. I am not going to change the name of that. I've been calling it Hamas and not knowing, so it's Hamas.
Yes, at one time, the what you know as Al's Steakhouse was called a White Chimney, and Rami had that restaurant for a long, long while in the 1950s and 60s.
So that predated, I can't think of his last name,
Al Kukas.
Al Kukas.
Yeah.
That predated Al Kukas?
Oh, sure. Al bought the building from the White Chimney after his own place had burnt down, and he converted it and put, if you've ever gone there, you've seen a lot of the old gates from some of the breweries and so forth, and that was the background of that.
And so Al Kukas had those gates in there, and then when Ted Priavolis had it, those gates were kept up.
Just everything was kept the same since that time. But it was really, that's the background. You got to remember, at that time, there was not much in the way of anything on the west side of Larkin Avenue. Larkin Avenue, I believe, had a different name earlier, but at this time was pretty much a major road. But there was nothing out there until in '62 they built the West High School, Joliet West. And then over a period of time, it began to fill in. One of the developers, I believe, was the Bar Estate, as I remember, they had some functions out there also. And when they put St. Joe's out, it just bloomed afterwards.
The Bar Estate, that would be the Cherry Hill Bar?
Richard Barr, the senator,
Right.
whose statue is in the rotunda down at the State House.
Yeah, and he lived in Cherry Hill,
Lived in
right?
Cherry Hill, yeah. And he had a house out in Cherry Hill. And of course, his son was Bill Barr, who came to Joliet and was a representative down in Springfield for, I don't know how many years, but for quite a while. Yeah. But so we had a chance to, our firm, inadvertently perhaps, had a chance to watch the growth of Joliet on the west side. And we were part of it for a little, we were at least there. Then in about 60, 62, or somewhere in that period, we got too large for our office at the Lee. So we moved out to Marycrest. And then very quickly, we got too large for that office. And so we decided to go downtown because they had knocked down a building on the corner of Ottawa and Jefferson and put up a new building called EMCO Plaza. And we were the first tenants on the second floor of that building, which was filling up very rapidly. You had the Brumman Law Firm there, and the Gallowich Law Firm, and I can't remember all the other people that were there, but that was the building we moved into downtown.
Yeah, they had a radio station at that time, too, I believe.
I was an investor.
Bill Lipsy and
I was an investor in that, WJRC, yes.
WJRC.
Not a happy venture, but I
Well,
was.
that's for another story, another time.
But anyway, and we were down there during the years when they built the courthouse, which was an experience on its own because they built a courthouse, they had to dig a hole. It's limestone, so they were blasting. So we would hear constant noises all day long of blasting, and every so often a blast would be too much for the apron. They placed across it, and something would go blasting around the place. But it was a interesting time. We watched, of course, the old courthouse had been built, I guess, in the 1880s, and I worked in that courthouse as a consultant to the treasurer of Will County sometime in the early 60s. So, and it was a fine, old, very archaic courthouse. It was a historical place. It was wonderful. As an operating office, it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
So
now, when they put the new courthouse up, Jack, was it like like Comiskey Park and the cell? The Comiskey Park was over here, and they put the park here. They took it all down.
Yeah. And I always laugh about our courthouse because I said what really happened, it was going to be a tribute to Abraham Lincoln, but unfortunately they built it upside down. Because it's all in all, it's not the most workable building I've ever seen with concrete floors and all those kind of problems, and very difficult to expand. But anyway, we watched that all happen. When we moved downtown, there was still the Boston store was across from us, and there were all the old shoe stores over on Chicago Street, Marty Lewis's place. Walgreens was there. The parking garage was not there at that point. It was at that point it was Lieberman's and Juliet Office Supply and maybe I think also a furniture store on the corner. So all that kind of disappeared over the years.
Lots of activities still in the 60s, and you're down there. Can you name one or two clients you had back in those days? Maybe are gone?
Well, one client we've had that I know we've had since 1957 was the Village of Rockdale. We've been doing their work now for all those years. Most of the clients, we've outlived our clients. They probably have gone on to their eternal reward, but we had a small group of clients at that time, and we were doing, of course, we were doing the St. Joseph Hospital group for a period there. We also did their West Coast affiliates. There was a hospital in San Francisco, and one in Los Angeles, and one in Santa Barbara. So we had traveled out there twice a year to do that work. Yeah. What was happening at that time, too, in the hospital world, Medicare had been passed, and Medicare required the hospitals to evaluate all of their assets, which they had not kept track of, and to place them on the books for depreciation purposes, because Medicare allows depreciation. And so during that time, there was a change in the hospitals as they moved away from kind of parish operations and religious operations to where lay people were doing all the work, because they had to get a hold of accountants, they had to get a hold of computer people. There was a major change in the offices. Beside that, there was a need to bill underneath the Medicare rules. At one time or another, our firm was at least conversant with those rules, which are a bit difficult to understand.
Yeah.
So,
when you're downtown, do you take on any new partners?
well, over a period of time, we did add partners. Some came and went because we probably got there was kind of a failure on the part of CPA firms in the early 60s and 70s of having too many partners for the wrong reason. You pretty well need partners who can bring business in and can control business and handle the work, not themselves. If all you can do is work yourself, you limit your ability. If you can use your talents to manage people, you can do much better. So
There's some of your people just calling you down.
I hope it's off. I'll call them later.
That's right.
Anyway, so it was it's kind of a different kind of period. Trying to explain Joliet in the 50s and 60s today is so much more difficult. We had less than 80,000 people. Probably at that time, Jim and I knew every lawyer and most of the judges. And that would be nearly impossible today because the bar is so much larger. And there wasn't that many people in my own profession. I knew all the people in our profession in town. And so it was maybe a little more friendly atmosphere. At least it was that you knew people and had a chance to talk to them. And of course, we've gone, 160,000 people. We cover 3 townships now. So in the earlier years, the city of Joliet ended around Larkin Avenue, then went on as far as the railroad tracks. So that was a very peculiar period from that standpoint.
Yeah. And well, it was a city in transition, early transitions too, because the shortly after that, the Jefferson Street, what's that called, the mall out there? Jefferson Street Mall, right?
Yes.
Jefferson Street Shopping Center.
Weebles and Montgomery Ward and all those stores were out there.
Moved out there, and then after that, the Louis Joliet Mall, and it certainly led to the transition of retail in downtown Joliet. And today we have entertainment, court services, and banking, and dining, and it's a little different downtown, but it's also a downtown going through transition and emerging now in 2016. How many years were you in downtown Joliet?
Somewhere between 40 some years, I think.
Yeah.
In the early 60s to the 13 or 14 years ago, so it'll be around 2001. And we actually, what happened, we started at the IMCO Plaza on the second floor with a quarter of the floor, and then by the end of the period we were there, we had the whole floor as we expanded and we needed more space for our people. So it was a nice place to be. Downtown was a pleasant place to work. Parking was a relatively inexpensive, $15 a month, as I remember. And all in, and you had a lot of places to eat for lunch and so forth. It was, and of course, you could probably make as many phone calls as you wanted, or probably see people at lunch and save a phone call because you saw everybody in a relatively small environment. So that was the way it was, and it went on for, as I said, we were down there 40 years. But we had the excuse of being late because the bridge was up. That was one of the.
We still use that one. Well, we still use that excuse.
When I was president of the chamber in 1969, and I felt that was one of the detriments to the East Siders. They couldn't always complain that the bridge was up, and that's why they were late. But a West Sider has a perfect excuse anytime he came late at a bridge.
So the CPA industry itself, the city of Joliet in transition, obviously things are happening that are, some of the retail is leaving, and I suppose some of the law firms are leaving. How about the industry itself, the CPA, Certified Public Accountants? Is there anything changing there? You had this large staff. This is also the period where computers start to come into the scene.
Well, actually, that's true. What happened is kind of interesting. I had a chance of having kind of a wonderful view of it. I was 14 years on the Board of Examiners in the state of Illinois, which at that time gave the exam. So I watched this changeover. The number of people taking the exam increased tremendously. And then about halfway through maybe a little earlier than that, through my career as a Board of Examiner, the number of young women that began to appear. And all of a sudden, they went from a relatively small number to 50% of our candidates, so that right now in our firm we have 2 women partners, an example of the growth that's happened in that area. And it's become, the number of people in the profession has increased tremendously, because another one of my duties was to be, I was on the board of the CPA Society, and I signed certificates there. And for a while, we were adding as many as 800 members to our professional society in 1 year. So the expansion of the CPA certificate has been tremendous. When I passed the exam, I was one of 1,500 members of the Illinois Society in 1956 or 7. When I was chairperson in 1991, we had 30,000 members, and we did not have all the CPAs in the state in our membership.
Yeah.
So it's been a tremendous number, a tremendous increase. And again, as I say, we have been very fortunate because we've been able to get some tremendously bright people from women who in 1957, there may have been 4 or 5 CPAs in Chicago who were women. I know that the firm I worked for had 3 women on staff, which was unbelievably different than other firms.
Yeah, and they weren't secretaries.
No, they weren't. They were,
Yeah.
and in fact, one was a CPA, and the other 2 later became CPAs. The point was that was not the ordinary situation. The big firms were all male, totally male, and of course they've gone through a progression in that area because they needed the brightest people, and half the brightest people happen to be young women. So we've all learned that this is the way to grow, and so we've made the progression much better than other professions, I think. Although other professions are moving along they're now probably as quickly as we did in the 1980s and 90s.
Yeah. Well, so you go from downtown, and you mentioned earlier, we'll talk about it now, you're looking for a new location? Were you actually looking for a new location, or just happened?
They sold the building out from under us to the county of Will. So
That's right, I
it wasn't
forgot that.
really looking. And of course, these 3 buildings that were out here were built by Ed Dollinger. They came out here, and this was the building they had purchased. And all of a sudden, our excuse for being late had disappeared because we no longer get a bridge. But it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes to get out here, and it's a great location, adequate parking, and it's been very fine. And again, the center of Joliet, perhaps in the 1950, was downtown. Now most of the law firms have left downtown. They're all scattered all over the area. So the banks have now consolidated down where they only have 1 bank downtown. So, well, maybe there's 2 now, but there was 1 at the time. So all of a sudden, all those other reasons for being there had kind of disappeared. So we didn't look for a new place downtown. We looked to the west side.
Yeah. What year was that? Do you recall?
I think about 2001, 2002.
Okay. Now, one of the things you mentioned, which I didn't remember, and I'm glad you recall that you were president of the Joliet Chamber of Commerce. This is something, and knowing you through the years, has been your personal mission, but you've also seen to it that your staff, particularly your partners in your management, do their due diligence in community outreach and become members of clubs, organizations, support groups, etc.
Well, we encourage our people to do that. There was an ad sitting in our coffee room, and I just picked it up. It shows the number of organizations that over a period of a year we've had some involvement with. There must be 50 organizations here.
We're going to show that.
High schools and
we'll do
grammar
that.
schools. I was on Cornerstone Board for a long time. I was chairperson the last 3 years up to this year. I was on Guardian Angels Board for 15 or 20 years. Served on Red Cross Board, the Drug Council Board. Served on, I've lost, Unity Crusade Board, Chamber of Commerce Board. And then professionally with the Illinois Society, I served as chairperson in 1991. Spent 9 years off and on their board, and have probably another 30 years at committee chairs of various committees. So we've encouraged the involvement of our firm in any kind of a thing like that. It's not only is it, you can say it's good business, but it's a great way for people to learn what's going on and to understand what the problems are in the community.
Right.
When you work with a community group like Cornerstone with 1,000 people who are coming there all the time, or with Guardian Angel with the work they did with mentally disturbed young people. When you work with, say, even anywhere you work, all those places, if you listen to what's going on, you're going to learn a lot about your community, and you can be of help and trying to alleviate these problems, and that's the best thing one can do.
Yeah. There's a club that you belonged to for years as well. Was there not a club that you belonged for years?
Oh, I belong to Rotary for some. Actually, I can tell
I'm
you,
looking for your pin. I don't see your pin.
I can tell you, I belonged to Rotary for 30 years as of this year, because it was just in our weekly bulletin that's mentioned my membership had started back 30 years ago. So it must have been sometime in 1986 that I joined. And where I think they do great work is every year we have a charity raffle in which money is given for capital additions to some one of the various charitable groups in our city. And it's been, to my mind, a tremendously effective tool. When I'm up at OLA, or Our Lady of Angels, my wife is, she rides in a bus to the doctor, and the bus has a placard on it saying it was supported by a Rotary grant.
Right.
So there's so many areas and that's, if you go through life and don't do that, you certainly miss out on a lot of what life should be about. That you have a responsibility to get involved and support things, and to give some of you what God's given you to those people who need help.
Yeah. It's a great philosophy that you've had through the years, and one of which I know your partners and your management group and your staff also adhere to. We saw that ad that Jack was talking about, and all those organizations that, in one way or the other, Women Rogers Rana-Ruzon supports and undergirds or have members who are on their committees, subcommittees, and boards. They've done that for years. One of the other things that the firm has had, and that is a constant, successful year after year of business. And why do you think that is? I mean, there's been accounting firms, and I've only been around Joliet since 1978, that I know that are no longer in business, or have consolidated, or have moved out.
Well, there's two facets of what you're talking about, and it's one of the things that some 30 years ago we joined, at that time, a national group of CPA firms. Now it's international. One of the reasons was the major problem for a firm like ours is the transition from the first series of partners to the second, and now we're in our third series of partners. I'm old enough at 88 to have seen 3 series. And the fact of the matter is, most of the firms that were in town with us somehow failed at that transitional period. Which is not surprising. Throughout the country, the consolidation of CPA firms, when they occur, nearly always occur when aged partners are looking for succession and they look someplace else. It's really kind of maybe it's a failure to understand the problem early enough, but whatever it is, we've been very fortunate. First of all, we had the kind of people who could pick it up afterwards and carry on. And we've done it twice now, and I think we should be very proud of that. Presently, our firm has got, again, transitional period. We have 2 women partners because those are talented people that should be partners. We have 5 partners, and we're going through somewhat of a transition again because one of our senior partners, Edward Marceau, is going to retire. So it's a difficult process, and I can't take too much credit for it, but somehow we've overcome that particular problem. And that's why we've been here. Now we started in '57, so we're coming up to our 60th year next year.
Amazing, isn't it?
And we're larger today than we ever been. And we probably have, I tried to figure out earlier, we have about 20 people here. We have 3 young interns coming on in June, coming out of St. Francis or Lewis. And we've recruited out of those 2 schools considerably. And so we're very fortunate. And beside which, we've got some pretty talented people in this city that we can work with.
Yeah. So the Women Rogers Rana-Ruzon, by the way, if you did not know it, is the largest locally owned and managed accounting firm in Joliet, in Will County. And your business, and you mentioned this earlier, that you had business early on in California, but even to this day, you have business outside of Will County.
Oh, yeah.
And some of the I'm going to call it unique areas of accounting, and Howard Ellison is one of those. And then your other partner, whose name now is escaping me, So you have different partners into specific areas. We mentioned Howard Ellison before. He's into appraisals, business evaluations, which are really big these days.
Well, especially because of since 20 years ago, in the case of divorces and there's a business involved, there's a need to appraise the value of those businesses, or there might be a pension plan which has to be appraised. And he's got the credentials to do it and does an awful lot of work in that particular area. Another partner, David Meyer, is a specialist in municipalities and school districts. So we do an awful lot of school districts, we do a lot of municipalities. And while they're not that different, they are peculiar enough that it helps to have a special knowledge of it. Those kind of people, those groups, are covered by a separate board called the GASB Board, Government Accounting Board. So you have to keep up with that particular area of expertise.
Yeah.
In the case of Howard, he's kind of a acid test. He has to testify in court, and so he's under the gun pretty much all the time, because either you prove to people that you can give good testimony and keep,
well,
and
he's an
support
expert in that area.
and support, and he does a great job of supporting his positions. So it's and basically it's the field is that way now. Probably our other partners do more work in taxes and community operations or buildings. And I think if you were going to say Mary Lancaster does an awful lot of work with non-for-profits,
Right.
which is a special area.
Right.
And then Kathy Thomas does an awful lot of tax work, and that's another important, it's still a very important part of our business, because we do an awful lot of tax returns, and we've just finished one of those horrendous busy seasons, and we're done. But
Not really.
I don't want to take too much credit. I pretty much sit by. I'm not much involved in most of what these people do. They work hard, they maintain good relations with clients, and they do very competent work. I'm very proud of the people who are part of my firm.
Yeah. Well, you should be proud of what you've, I mean, to have a firm that's coming up on 60 years, starting out in 1957. How old were you back in 1957?
I was 30 years of age.
When you think about that, a 30-year-old entrepreneur opening up with your buddy a firm.
Let me just mention, at the very time that happened, I had a child and another one coming, a house with a mortgage, and was married only 2 years at that time. Yeah, thinking back, I must have been either witless or confident. It had to be one of the two. But it worked out well. We really didn't have a bad year ever since that time. We've had years that were off a little bit because we've had a number of recessions here in Will County and Joliet. We've had real drop-offs and problems. But I can't say that any one of them was critical. It's just they were a little bit of a problem, and we solved the problems as we went along. But it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It really has been a lot of fun.
Let's conclude with Jack Rogers looking at that camera and giving advice to that person out there, that woman out there, that man out there, that young person out there who's thinking about going into business, having their own business. What would you tell someone today if they were thinking along those lines?
Well, the first thing I would tell them, because we need them, I would tell the young people who are thinking about college to really think about becoming an accountant. The jobs are out there. If we don't hire you, many other people will. There's a great shortage of people who've got that kind of talent. And it's a good living, and beside which, it's often a pathway into other worlds, because I've got 3 of my children are CPAs, and none of them are in auditing or accounting in a firm, but all of them have been very successful because of having a certificate. The second thing I say, if you're going to go in business, do consider working with an accounting firm early on, so you keep track of your records, so you know what you're doing, to get an idea whether you're doing it, because otherwise, a lot of times you don't trust feelings, you have to look at facts. And then the final situation is, as you get to a certain point, look carefully at what you want to do as far as succession goes, because every firm, after a few years, succession becomes a problem.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things they should look at. Succession is the most difficult of all processes, because it's something that the people who are doing the business have never thought about until all of a sudden it faces them.
Yeah.
So,
We're going to go out now, and Jack, thank you so very much.
Thank you very much.
And as we leave you, one of the things that happens every single year at Wilmer Rogers Duran and Ruzon, usually at Sills, is a party. And we're going to leave you with the annual Christmas party produced and put on, and have fun by Wormer Rogers Durand and Ruzon for their clients and for their friends and for their family members, and of course their staff and partners. So we'll see you next time. I'm Richard Fredrickson, and this has been Profiles. And once again, we're back here in Rockdale, Illinois at Sills. This is the Wormer Rogers Durand Ruzon Holiday Party. This is the opening of the holiday party season. This kicks it all off. Everyone, well, except you, and you're invited probably next year. Wormer Rogers Durand Ruzon, their clients, the customers, elected officials, all kinds of folks. And we're going to visit with as many as we can just to kind of share the festivities here tonight with you here on Channel 6. I'm Richard Fredrickson, and come along with me. This is such a great time, and what a great party this is. I have one of the soon-to-be partners of Wormer Rogers Durand and Ruzon. When you see this show, it'll be just a matter of weeks, because January 1, 2014, Mary Lancaster, new partner, Wormer Rogers Durand and Ruzon.
Thank you very much. Very proud to be. It's been a long road, and I've worked very hard, and I've worked with some really good people.